Welcome everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for our webinar, Going Virtual, Student Onboarding Tips and Tricks. My name is Lindsay Thomas, and I'm the Training and Documentation Manager for iClicker. I am very excited to introduce today's presenter, Natalie Dougall, who is a former English professor with 10 years of experience teaching online. Natalie is now a training specialist and faculty advocate here at iClicker. Over to you, Natalie.
Thank you, Lindsay. So Lindsay and I work together to do training and documentation, and Lindsay is responsible for all the great resources that you can find in our support portal. So we'll talk about that a little bit today, but we are real people here at iClicker, and we're really here to support you. So let's go ahead and get going. Okay, so today, here's what we're going to be covering. First of all, we're going to go over iClicker Cloud for Instructors really quickly, because we know that some of you may not have used the software before. And if you have used the software in the past, we're going to talk about how you can optimize settings for your virtual classroom. You may have been using it in your brick and mortar class, and now it might be time to change a few of those settings to make it something you can continue to use in your virtual classroom setting. We'll talk about iClicker Reef for students, how you can best introduce iClicker to your students so that it's a really minimal lift for you to get them going. We'll talk about tips for your first day. We'll talk about iClicker and your LMS and ways you can bring your iClicker grades into your learning management systems gradebook. We'll discuss the iClicker Reef student experience and give you all a taste of it. And then we will have some polling questions and best practices for using polling in your classroom as you turn to virtual sessions. And then we'll end with a little bit of Q&A. So hopefully everybody is here for this presentation. You're in the right place and you're excited to get started. So for iClicker Cloud for instructors, sometimes instructors will say, oh, I'm using iClicker Reef. iClicker Reef is what your students use. For you as the instructor, you use iClicker Cloud. So before and after class, what you're going to want to do is sign in as an instructor at iclicker.com. If you haven't done iClicker before, that's where you can create an account. It takes a few seconds. There's where you can set up a course. We take minimal information up front to start a course. And iclicker.com is also where you go after class when you want to manipulate your iClicker data. During class, you're going to need to have the iClicker Cloud desktop software. I already have my desktop software up and running up here. It's just a little habit that I have when I start one of these sessions. I will, log into, in this case, go to webinar. I'll start showing my screen. I start the iClicker Cloud desktop software, and I get my PowerPoint in presentation mode, and I'm ready to go. So what this does for me is I can actually see how many people are in my classroom right now. Right now I've got 11 iClicker Reef students. I know I have more people who are watching this presentation than are in my iClicker Cloud session, but for you as an instructor, this can be a nice alternative to trying to say, watch the attendees in your screen in Zoom or in Hangouts, where it can get really chaotic really, really fast as students come and go. This makes it so that you can really see which of your registered students have come to class without exiting your presentation. The other thing that I want to encourage you to do, if you're using iClicker Cloud, is to try the iClicker Cloud Instructor mobile app. It's something you can download onto your Android or onto your iPhone. And what it can do is it turns it into a remote control that you can have on your desk so that, again, you're not kind of trying to juggle all those screens. We've been doing these online presentations and online trainings for years and years, and juggling screens is probably the most difficult part of the whole thing. Just before we started, I was gung-ho to go, and Lindsay said, hey, I can't see your screen, and I'd already gone through three slides, and we had to start our rehearsal over again. So those kinds of things can be a little bit frustrating, and so by having the iClicker Cloud Instructor mobile app on the desk, you can preview your students' responses, turn polls on and off, and that can just make it so that there's less to manage on your screen. So in iClicker Cloud, you want to make sure that you have certain settings in place before you have your students participate in your online course. First of all, you want to make sure that you go into the devices part of your settings and make sure that your settings are set to mobile devices only. If you are allowing students to participate with an iClicker remote before, it would be really nice to send a note to your students and say, hey, take that iClicker remote, put it somewhere safe, take the batteries out. And they're going to be able to use it when they come back to campus, but for now they're just going to want to put it somewhere where they're not going to lose it. So you also want to say, hey, we're going to be using mobile devices now. And by mobile devices, that means a tablet, a smartphone, or a laptop. In the attendance tab, you want to make sure that you leave the box beside auto run unselected. You just want to make sure that any of your classes, you're simply starting and ending them manually. Under location, you want to make sure that you are not requiring location for attendance because we're everywhere. I'm in Los Angeles, Lindsay is in Austin. I don't know where you are right now, but chances are you're not anywhere where I need to know your location, so make sure that's unchecked. Then in the polling area, you'll want to make sure that you're enabling screenshot sharing. This is really important, especially if you have a student who only has one device to work with. So you may have students who only have a laptop and no smartphone. You may have students who are participating in your classes entirely from a smartphone. You really want to make sure that you're enabling screenshot sharing, so whatever situation the student finds themselves in, they can easily see the question that they're responding to. And if you're setting up a new course, all the settings that I just described are the default settings. There's no need to modify anything here. So if you're using iClicker for the first time, you're going to introduce it to your students next week, just go ahead, set up your course with confidence, and know that it's already optimized for virtual learning sessions. Okay, so we've covered what you as an instructor kind of need to do to get going. If you're going and sitting here and saying, oh no, you just went way too fast, and I thought you were going to tell me how I could use this software in my class, don't worry. You can sign up for an online training with a real live person by going to iclicker.com and finding the training link on the screen. And we also have lots and lots of videos and lots of webinars that we've put together exactly for people in your situation. So if you're looking more to get started with iClicker, we have a ton of those resources for you. But right now we're going to focus on our students and how we can get them into our classes. So when you introduce iClicker to your students, sometimes I have instructors who say, my students are digital natives, they can figure out anything. And they'll just kind of throw them and say, hey, I'm using iClicker, here's minimal instructions, go for it. And I just want to ask you, we are all car natives. Is everyone you know a good driver? A lot of times when I ask this question live, I hear a smirk and a snark throughout the room because everybody knows terrible drivers, even if they've had their license since the day they turned 16. Just because someone is familiar with technology doesn't mean they're good at it. So we really want to make sure that we provide explicit onboarding instructions to our students. This lowers stress for absolutely everyone, for you and your students. And I don't know about you right now, but anything I can do to lower stress for myself or anyone else, I am jumping into whole hog. This also reduces your in-class disruptions. So if you've already onboarded your students and you're asking polling questions, you're not going to have your students say, filling up the chat in the classroom going, what is she talking about? I'm not set up at all, and having a really stressful situation. It also establishes iClicker as a fun and engaging tool that makes online class lively. If you're having small virtual learning sessions, it can make them feel really like the old times. So for example, some of you are with me live, but I know some of you are also going to watch this as a recording. I'm going to be asking polling questions during the session. And if you're watching this as a recording, I want you to kind of pay attention to yourself and your reaction to when I ask polling questions and whether or not it makes this video recording more valuable for you or not. So let's go ahead and get started. So before your first day, here's some tips, even if you're using Classic or Cloud. First of all, we have a lot of instructor quick start guides to help you get online quickly. If you go ahead and look at this, you can go ahead and see our support site. We have so many resources that we've put together, and we've been really working hard to move instructors online, because this is such a great tool and it's so optimized to use in the online virtual classroom. We really are throwing all of our time and energy into making as many resources as possible for you and your students to get started. So here we have a quick start guide using iClicker for remote instruction, and it goes through everything step by step. We've got beautiful videos, so you can literally go do step one, watch a video that will walk you through, just do it in another tab, and it'll get you up and running with your virtual classroom. We even have a small video about, when you open your software at the correct time, and what the best sort of way of doing that is. So I really want to encourage you all to go over to our support site to find that information. You also want to include information in your syllabus and your LMS, and you want to make sure that your students have a really easy and dependable place to access that information. And it's a really good idea to send a message to your students about iClicker before the first day of use. There are questions that students generally have when you start using iClicker. They want to know, how is iClicker going to impact my grades? It's going to ask, how often will you use iClicker? It's a best practice if you're using iClicker to use it in every virtual learning session that you have, and to ask 3 or 5 to 5 questions during, say, a 40-minute class session. You may find that you want to ask a lot more polling questions. I'll tell you a trick. Sometimes when you're teaching online like this and you are doing a live session, you're going to need to cough. You're going to need to get a glass of water. You're going to need to take your headset off and scratch your ears and then put it back on. So sometimes when asking a polling question, it's a really nice time for you as the presenter to mute yourself and then take care of whatever needs to be taken care of. The students are busy with a task, and it just makes it easier for you to, transition like you would if you were in a regular classroom. Your students also generally want to know, do I need an iClicker Reef subscription? If so, what's the best way to get one? And again, we have more information about this over at iclicker.com if you're still trying to figure out those questions. And then the number one question students are going to want to know is, why are you using iClicker in my online class? Sometimes students assume this is a meaningless play, or it's just a way for you to try and help them be social, and they don't realize that in-class polling actually has deep value in these classrooms, especially when you're trying to make that online class be a two-way conversation instead of someone passively watching on a screen. So if you're going to be using iClicker with your LMS, and you're going to be bringing your grades from iClicker into your LMS, you want to keep a few things in mind. You want to include iClicker again as a section in your LMS with self-support items. Again, anytime you can, really try and make it so students can self-support. And it's really good to include whatever your iClicker policies and instructions are right there in your LMS. So if you are just using iClicker as a voluntary thing when students are able to attend your online class, you want to be really clear about that, because again, I think a lot of us are pretty stressed out right now, and the thing that stress does to our brain is it makes it really hard to remember information, to retain it, to apply it. And so the more that you can make it easy for your students to find that information, the more that the stressed outedness of their brain is going to come down a little bit. We also have iClicker Reef student checklists. So we have entire checklists that you can pass on to your students and say, hey, listen, just follow this list and you're going to be able to get into the class very, very easily. It's a lot like the instructor checklist that I showed you earlier. It breaks things down very, very specifically. We also have this troubleshooting your connection to Reef item that students can access. And this is something that you might want to put in your LMS, because I like to say, you're bringing new tech into your classroom. You shouldn't have a new tech support job. So let us do that work for you by really linking heavily to iclicker.com and the support items that we already have. And we're going to be updating those items as things change, as the product gets updated. So, really let us take care of those items instead of trying to create them yourselves and just link them out. Again, we've got our knowledge base. You could go in there and search for remote instruction, and there we've got a whole lot of different information, again, if you're moving online. So for students, creating an account is really quick and easy. It's something that they can do very, very quickly. One thing that you're going to want to recommend your students do is that they add the appropriate student ID to match the student ID in your LMS's roster. This makes it so that you'll be able to upload grades easily to your LMS, and you won't have a problem, for example, if a student's name is Michael in the LMS, but they call themselves Mike in iClicker Cloud. It's going to instead focus on that student ID section. The student ID is usually whatever your students use to log in with your students' learning management system. It may be different at your institution. You may want to reach out and just say, hey, what student ID should my students be using to make sure that anything that I am uploading into my LMS works properly. And then students who were previously using iClicker remotes should register them in their iClicker Reef profiles so they get credit for the participation they did earlier. They shouldn't go and create a new account. If they had an account before they started class, and if they were using a remote before, that's okay. They don't really need to do anything in that situation. However, if a student was using a remote and they were using remotes only and they're just setting up an iClicker Reef account, putting their remote ID into their account will make sure that the questions that you gave them points for earlier, they'll get credit for. So when your students need to join your class, all you need to share with students is the name of your course, the name of your institution, the name of your course, and they're going to use that information to search for your course in iClicker. So this is an example of searching for Bio 102, and you can see you get more information before you have the course and you can click on it. Students may also need to enter an access code so they can have access to iClicker Reef. If that's the case for your students, make sure that you share the access code with your students and make it really easy for them to copy and paste it. Students are going to need to redeem the access code via a web browser. They can do that from their phone if they say open Chrome and sign in at iclicker.com. And students really need to take care of this before the 14-day free trial ends, just because it would be a little bit disruptive and they might get a little panicked. So really try and get your students to put access codes in during that 2-week period. Okay, so if you're ready to be my student and you haven't added it yet, you can go ahead and do this really easy. You can use iClicker Reef, or you can go to iclicker.com and sign in as a student. And then you can go ahead and add my course. You're going to click that plus sign in the corner, and then you're going to use this information to find my class. So the institution is Macmillan Learning, and the course name is iClicker Onboarding Tips. You can also simply search for my last name, Dougall, D-O-U-G-A-L-L. And then when you find the course, you're going to simply click on the name. And once you've added the course, you click that join button and you will be counted as being in attendance. So right now I have 12 students in my class. No one is absent, so that means that nobody has who has joined my roster is not currently in the class. And your roster is built as students add your course. So it looks like I've got a good amount of people. I would like to ask everybody a numeric question at this point. How many tools or programs have you used in the last 2 weeks? So Zoom, FaceTime, how many more of them are there? Hangouts, Duo, Skype. Who knows how many different tools we're using now. Now I can see as the instructor how long it's been going. I can also see how many of my students have responded, and if I want, I can actually see my responses come in live right here, and I can see what students are saying. So I'm going to go ahead and stop this one. It looks like on average instructors have used 3 new tools in the last 2 weeks, and then I've got 4, 6, 5. I'll just tell you for myself, I have an elementary school age child, and I've had to onboard with PowerSchool, Clever.com, Prodigy, a million different programs for these kids to use, and I'm glad they have so many resources. But even though I do this professionally, I find all this onboarding and new tools a little bit overwhelming. So, I hope this is something that we can keep in mind as we think about our students using new tools. The tools maybe themselves are not the issue as much as how much we're trying to learn and adapt to right now. So on your first day of class with your students, to kind of help them get going with iClicker well, you want to avoid associating iClicker with grades for your first session. That way, you have students who are high achievers and they are looking at this as a challenge that they really want to surmount. So by not associating iClicker with grades for that first session, you can just let students become comfortable with the tool. You might want to devote live class time to getting them onboarded as well. I did that, and you can see it didn't really take that much time. I just simply talked through how you add a course, and you were able to do it. So I hope that as you kind of participate in that process, you see how easy it is. And actually, it's really nice to give your students a task to do in real time. And you want to follow those onboarding instructions with some polling questions. You don't want to get all your students up to speed with iClicker and then be like, great guys, see you next time, because they're going to be really disappointed. They're excited to talk back to you. Watching my daughter watch videos from her teacher, she's actually more excited to do her work than ever before because it's the way she can communicate with her teacher that she adores. And I don't think probably in a college classroom we have that same level of love as a second grade teacher. But our students really do enjoy their relationships with us, and they really do enjoy the challenge of schoolwork. So make it a back and forth conversation by asking polling questions. You're going to want to use low stakes or icebreaker questions at first. Again, we don't want to stress students out and make them think that this is all about performing perfectly. And you, on that first class session, try all the question types and demonstrate how they work and how grading works, because your students might react with more enthusiasm to different kinds of polling questions than others. And you're also going to kind of understand the beat of your class and when you need a fast question or maybe when you need something that's a little bit more contemplative. Um, and using iClicker is also a wonderful way to have controlled question and answer sessions. So what I'm getting a lot of feedback from professors is that they are really concentrating on, say, doing a live event like this, but they're really distracted because they can see that their chat box is just popping off all the time. And it may just be students saying, so glad to be back in class, or it's too hot in my room, ha ha ha, whatever they're doing. And then you have somebody saying, is SA2 still going to be due on da da da? And you're worried you're going to miss an important question. By using iClicker to have controlled Q&A sessions, you can stop a few times throughout your live session and say, hey, who has questions for me? And you can say to your students, listen, I'm going to review the Zoom chat transcript afterwards, just to see what was happening there, but I'm not monitoring it live. Right now, as I'm giving this presentation to you, I am not monitoring our webinar chat room at all. What we have is we have a few people who actually come on and they monitor our chat, and we work really hard to answer everybody's questions so that the presenter is not distracted. So that's what we've been doing for a very long time. And for you as an instructor, you're not going to have a team of people who can help you like that. So using iClicker to have more controlled Q&A sessions can be a nice solution. So here's one of those games that we really like to play with students when we're first letting them know how iClicker works. This is called Balance the Bars. And all you need to do is turn on a multiple choice question. Anytime I click that green button, I get a screenshot of my screen sent to my students. And you can see right now, they're all trying to get the bars balanced across these 5 columns. This is really fun because students get to see, hey, my real life behavior matters. Oh, it was close. And it really matters if I change my answer, I move things around. Okay, I'm not going to do this whole one, but you can see how fun it is to let your students kind of respond in real time. Here we go. Okay, another thing that you can do with iClicker is you can use our short answer function. This makes it possible for students to respond in a tweet length, 144 characters of an answer. So this is really nice, and I want to know from you all, what are your questions and concerns about moving class online with iClicker? And I don't have any responses yet, but I'm going to want to preview them, but I'm not going to want you all to see it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this over to my second screen, and then I can look at what's going on in my class. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stop my poll, and let's see what this group is concerned about. All right. People want to know, how can I prevent cheating if we're using a remote? One of the things that you can do is keep it low stakes. Don't make it something that's a huge part of their classroom grade. Make it something that is fun and engaging. You know, this is a time when when you're asking polling questions, you're totally allowed to ask trick questions. Then we have, I'm worried about students participating in Reef, but not actually being in the Zoom class. And that might be one of those things where you verify the Zoom attenders against the Reef attenders. And again, keep it low stakes, and then cheating just is less incentivized. Will my students need to toggle between screens to see questions? If your student is only using one device, yes, they're going to need to toggle between screens. And so that's something that you want to keep in mind as you're asking questions. And, you know, if you have a student who you know is only using one device, one of the things that you can do is you can actually keep track of when that particular student responds in iClicker. And then you can stop the poll only after that has happened, because you know that maybe they have to go into a different screen. How can you use it with a recorded lecture? Well, if you're watching the recording of this, it's very clear. While your student is not able to participate in the live iClicker polling questions, it still adds a really good live component to your class that makes a recording a lot more watchable. Okay, let me go ahead and close this up. All right, and you can see I can make my menu really, really small. Okay, so here's some more iClicker polling ideas that you might want to use in your class. You can take the pulse of your class to figure out, what do they already know? So one of the things that's going to be really nice is when you get to focus more on your subject. And you might be wondering, what did they retain in the time that we've been apart? You might also want to know, what do they think that they know? A lot of times our students come into class with preconceived knowledge, preconceived ideas about our subject, and knowing what common misconceptions that they have makes it easier to teach, because you can confront them head on. And you should also use iClicker to say, hey, what do you wish you knew about your students? What do you wish they knew about you? And again, making iClicker a part of your classroom where things go back and forth like a conversation is really important. So, you know, I've been meeting with people from a closet fairly frequently. And I think it's really nice to tell your students, hey, I'm not in an ideal situation any more than you are. We're in this together. And so again, it's that way to use iClicker to have a conversation. You know, and then you can ask more specific ideas. Like I could say, is Wikipedia a source you can use in your essays? Why or why not? We really want to focus on asking those why and how questions whenever we can, to kind of give our students more to chew on. And, you know, this is kind of a question I might ask my students, because I taught comp. What methods do you use to proofread your writing? And do like more crowdsourcing with students. So you might want to ask your students on that first time together about the new policies in your class that you might have. So you might ask your students, hey, how does iClicker affect your grades? And you can see, okay, are they understanding? Oops. I've got that on short answer. I need to put it on multiple choice. There we go. So asking your students this lets you know, hey, did they read the new things that I asked them about? Do they know what kind of new policies are in place? And again, multiple choice questions tend to be answered really quickly. I've only had my poll open for a few seconds, and you can see that my responses are coming in really, really quickly. And again, okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop it. And again, this is really nice when you do multiple choice questions. You can do it really quickly. I open my results window, and I can give my students feedback very, very quickly by simply touching the answer that I believe is correct, that I'm deciding is correct. And untouching it will ungrade it again. So this is very easy and a quick way to give my students a lot of really quick feedback, and to give them a lot of times positive feedback when it may not be possible to give them something like an exam. You can still ask them iClicker polling questions, and they know whether or not they're on track. So you can also use iClicker to ask fun questions. This is a targeted question. And when I click that green button, it's going to send a screenshot to my student's device, and then they get to decide and tell you, hey, what am I wearing every day as a comfy, cozy outfit? Okay, I've got 3 responses. Target questions tend to be longer than other ones. They need to make sure that they click the image and then they press send. So if you've clicked on the image and you've selected something but you haven't pressed send, you want to go ahead and do that now. Okay, looks like that little bit of instruction got a little more participation. Let's go ahead and stop it. And then what I can do is I pull up my results, and then I click on my picture, and we can see most people are hanging out in their jammies, and no one is getting formal, and we have 1 Viking. Fabulous. So to grade it, I just grab and draw a box wherever the correct answer is, and then I click save, and then it grades everyone's response. It's really nice, quick, and you can also see I've been turning this on and off. It doesn't feel like a big, long time to you. For me, it gives me just enough time to take a sip of water. Okay, so I'm going to ask you an anonymous question. This is something you can ask of your students. Be careful when you use these anonymous questions, because they truly are anonymous. I just go over the 3 dots and I turn anonymous on. And I'm going to go ahead, let's go back, and click anonymous and just ask people, what is something you miss about in-person class sessions? All right. I was talking to myself. I had myself on mute, but now I'm back. All right, so you can see it's been about 45 seconds. I've got 7 responses. I'm going to go ahead and stop it. And because this is an anonymous poll, and I think you all are well behaved, but we may have a mischief maker among us, I'm not going to look at those until later. And that's because I'm not using my iClicker Cloud Instructor app right now. I'm not going to preview it right now. It's something that I can look at later. And that's really nice too. You don't have to do everything right in class. So we're at the portion where we can get to our questions, our Q&A. Let's go ahead and I'm going to turn my camera back on so it's a little more friendly, a little more easy. And why don't, if you can use the chat function, the question function, to go ahead and let us know any questions that you might have, that would be awesome.
We do have a question that's come in, Natalie.
Okay, can you see our cameras first?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Okay, all right, what's the question?
Okay, so I'm concerned about my students being able to follow instructions correctly. Can I create iClicker Reef accounts for my students?
Yeah, that's a common question that we get. There's a lot of desire to kind of make everything very easy for the student. Honestly, the easiest thing that you can do for your student is to pass along the instructions to them and have them really use iClicker resources as they put together their account. That way they're going to be more in charge of what they're doing, they have more ownership, and the process we've made really, really simple for students. So, this is a good time to kind of maybe let go of your students a little bit more and let them figure out this digital tool. And if they're having problems, we have a ton of support for them.
Great. And speaking of support, if I can't help my students, is there a person at iClicker who can?
That's a really great question. So if you go to iClicker.com and you click on support at the top of the screen, it'll take you to our support portal. And the first thing we try and provide everyone with is as many self-support items as they can. So we have lots of videos, we have lots of articles, we have clickable tours that you can take that can really walk you through any part of the iClicker setup process or iClicker use. So we really recommend using those resources for students. And I'll tell you, students are onboarding more easily at home than they did on campus. And I think a big part of that is everyone knows how to join the Wi-Fi at their house. Some of our students never joined campus Wi-Fi. They would use mobile data or they'd use a guest network and it would cause problems for them. Now that we have students at home, they're actually having fewer issues with onboarding. So again, give them good resources. And let's say they get really in a pickle, maybe they've got some situation that's quite unique. We do have live in-person support. They go to the support page and there's a link on the page that says contact support. They fill out a form and then they're going to be able to be served either by calling support or via email. So we try and get it so that students are covered on every avenue, and we also try and make it so that if it's 2 in the morning and they're trying to do something, obviously there's no phone support. We try and really make it so there's a lot of different varieties of support items so that if there's a student who needs a video, there's a video for that student. If there's a student who needs a checklist, there's a checklist for that student. So we really do try and make our support items really dynamic for a wide variety of students.
Great. Okay, another question we have. I don't see
Okay.
any students in my roster yet. How do I add them?
Yeah, your roster is built as students add your course. So today, when I started up this webinar, I didn't have anybody on my roster, and now I think I've got 15 in there. So that's something too that you can look at and you can say, oh, I can see half the students have added my class. That means they're ready for iClicker. That's a really good way to take the pulse of your class to see how many students are actually set up. So again, that's another really good benefit of students creating their own accounts and not you doing it. As you see your roster fill, okay, my students are using iClicker, they know how to do it. So it's a little reassurance for you as well.
Great, thanks, Natalie. And I
Yeah.
think that's it for questions. We haven't had any more come in, so I just
Okay.
wanted to go ahead and thank everyone for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks everybody. This was really fun, and we're going to be doing lots of these kinds of webinar events. And again, if you're watching this as a recording, I want you to think, was this engaging? Did using the iClicker events make it more exciting? It's just something to think about. I think it really even makes a recording of a class feel more alive. So thanks everybody.
Thanks, stay safe.